I didn't hear her yet, Clint.
Live
There we go.
streaming is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is October 1, 2021. We want to thank the amazing Clinton Ignatov for helping us today. Thank you. Concerned Medicine is a cool podcast, and I am proud to be part of it. And we are honored, and it's a real pleasure to have our guest today, Andrew McLuhan. Thank you, Andrew. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in rural southern Ontario, near somewhere between Bloomfield and Wellington.
Well, how cool is that? The first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
Love.
Oh, that is a great answer. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Ooh. I mean, I'm an ear guy.
That is good. So you're saying podcast, radio, live music. You want to be like zero in anything auditory?
I guess I have to reverse my answer a little bit. It's not that I prefer all my information by ear, but I guess I enjoy music and the sounds, that type of information. But as far as consuming knowledge, definitely I'm an eye guy. I like my books.
Yeah. No, that's good. We'll get a lot into what you just opened there, but staying on information for a second, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Nothing better to do? I don't know.
That's a good answer. But is this need, do you think this need or want to collect information is more innate or more invented?
Invented. I mean, it's an innovation like any other. It's a way to get ahead. It's hard to improve if you don't have any kind of continuity.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
See, I've been looking forward to this because you ask fun questions. Do thoughts create emotions? I mean, thoughts can lead to emotions. I don't think thoughts create emotions. People create emotions.
That is good. I like when people reword the verbs, especially in my questions, because I'm always trying to work on my questions. I don't want to settle for just them. Is thinking more innate or more invented?
I mean, it's hard to answer these innate versus invented questions because you have to go back so far, and it's all speculation on what's innate and what's invented. I mean, I have to think that it's all pretty much everything is invented at some point. We start out, depending on what you believe, but when you go back far enough, the basic human model, I don't think has very much to it. So, bare bones. See, Jerry, now you're getting me lost in the questions.
No, this is good. We want to be lost, but Andrew, I love you said speculation, because in essence, what I'm after in our dialogue today is a lot of your questions you can answer them because you have your aesthetics and you have your ways that you have developed as a human being. But sometimes people go, well, I can't answer that because I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm not asking you to answer it that way. I'm asking you to answer it as a speculator, or more so like a hunch, an impulse, or an intuition. Lily Tomlin's writer, Jane Wagner, wrote a great line. She said, reality is just a collective hunch. So we're just after your hunch. So, a couple of these questions at the beginning, I give these either or, and it doesn't mean it's either one of those. And again, it's also how you wanna put it into the context you want. So,
Mhm.
let's go on with thinking, 'cause
Cool.
this is one I got from your, great-granddad, Marshall McLuhan. What an amazing person. He said, "I don't know what I think until I'm not gonna tell you what he said. I'm asking you to fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until I"
Say it till I say it?
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
what Marshall said. That's cool. Joan Didion said, "I don't know what I think until I write it."
Hmm.
And, I've just put this in the script for the questions in the last half a year, and it's so fun because people have it goes all over the place. Do you think do can humans think without language?
Sure.
Yeah. So that's fine. So Chomsky says that language is not just words. It's culture, tradition, unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Andrew, how do you cope when language breaks down? When language doesn't work, what do you do?
I listen to my heart.
Nice.
Yeah. I I have a kind of my philosophy in that way is to lead with love, you know?
Yeah.
And it's hard to go wrong if you lead with love.
Yeah.
And if you do mess up, as long as your heart's in the right place, you can get through it.
Yeah. Did you get that on your own or the way your parents raised you?
Well, that's a classic question. I think it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah. So staying on thinking for a couple more questions. Your observations of humans in general, are we more feeling beings or more thinking beings?
I think we're moving. I think it depends. Well, since you asked the question here and now, I'd have to say we're moving more toward feeling than thinking. And I
Yeah.
think on the balance, we're more feeling than thinking,
Yeah.
on average.
Yeah. So these are two Alan Turing questions from 1950. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I mean, I'm not altogether sure what the soul is, so it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah. Turing's second question was, can machines think?
I mean, how did Turing explain or define thinking?
Yeah. That's a good question. I wouldn't wanna ruin it with an answer. No, that's
I
just my
mean,
smart ass comeback. I don't know what he defined it as, but go ahead. Yeah.
machines can do a lot of things. Um, the one thing they can't do is be creative. They're very machines can mimic creativity, but I don't think they can be genuinely creative because they're too logical, and that's their strength. It's not a weakness. It's just what they are, and actually, it's a good thing because if machines were if machines started developing true creativity, I'd be worried. Uh, Especially if they developed senses of humor, I'd be very worried. Then I'd worry for the future of humanity. But at this point, this is what humans are best at: is creativity, thinking outside the box, as it were. And a sense of humor goes a very very long way.
I love that. That is good. Uh, Andrew, do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
Happiness every time. Meaning,
Yeah.
you know, meaning can be hollow. It's it can be a good achievement, but it can also be very frustrating. Uh, Happiness uh, happiness is a beautiful thing, and it's the funny thing about happiness is it's so relative. It's so easy to achieve compared to meaning, because you can be, meaning is like a bit of a fixed target, whereas happiness is a shifting thing. It's relative. You can be two people can be very happy or unhappy about the same thing, and it's an interesting question putting happiness and meaning side by side, because um, they're both created by the individual. That's a curious thing. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you expounded on it, because just the roots of the question came from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He said meaning
Sure.
lasts, but happiness doesn't necessarily last. So if we share an ice cream cone together, we're both happy. It tastes good, but the talk and the time we share together might last for our lifetimes. So I'm
I
not
have to
saying
disagree
any of
with
these.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
but
they can both be transitive, just because they're both subjective. You know,
yeah,
you can, and it kind of depends on what you mean by meaning. But you can discover meaning in something that's satisfactory and even leads to a certain happiness, but it can be transitory,
yeah.
because situation changes and all of a sudden the meaning doesn't mean what it meant. So I'm not sure that meaning lasts at all.
Yeah. That's good. I like that word transitory. What does that mean? What does transitory mean?
Well, it shifts.
Yeah. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? Like, is consciousness bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
Well, this is another thing that I'm like the soul. What is consciousness? Uh, I
Yeah.
don't think I don't think there's a consensus on that, which is kind of funny, because you can sort of define consciousness as a consensus. Uh, that's another moving target, and I think it. Hmm. Give me the question again, Jerry.
Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? And it's again, of course it's both, but that's the more thing. Like, is it a little more? And I'm not trying to hold you to it and say, well, I'll say a little more this. I'm just saying, what's your intuition say? Are we like, is it there bubbling away, or are we actually creating it? And again, yeah, just not that defined, but
Yeah, I would say it's both, but I think it's uh, I think it's more a passive thing of the brain than an active thing, if that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah. So it's almost like part of us. It's again, another friend of mine says that we've invented everything. Well, we didn't invent eating food. It's probably innate in us. But
It's a
we,
very good
but when you,
question.
but the word eating, there's so many ways of eating, and then we invented the word eating. So that, and then there's breatharians who live by breathing.
Get out of here. Yeah, I know about the breatharians, but look, I don't think I don't think I think invent is an invented word. I don't think we
Yeah,
invent anything. I think we discover things.
yeah.
There's a big difference.
It's no, I'd love for you to differentiate, but before you do, I mean, we are so knee deep in the swamp muck of McLuhan, 5 times a week I hold sessions and we do tetrads. In the
Really?
big question, oh yeah, and it's very immense and intense, and it's fun. That's the main thing, is it's fun, and that's all we're trying to do. Well, is awe invented or innate? Because you can't do tetrads on innate things. You can't do a tetrad on a tree. You can do a tetrad on wood. Now, we cheat sometimes because we'll say, well, it's a debatable subject. Is awe invented or innate. And if I go, well, we're just going to go along that it's invented. So we're going to do the tetrad on it. So some people might go, nope, it's not invented, it's innate, blah, blah, blah. So this is
Well,
why I've sort of developed that question, innate or invented, which I know is hard to really differentiate because we just invented the words, but it is a way of proceeding with the tetrad. So go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, the way I understand and approach the tetrad is not innate versus invented, but human versus non-human.
Yeah.
Because Dad, Eric, was quite insistent that the tetrad's only applicable to human artifacts, human things.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what they are. But the main criteria is human or non-human, because animals or things in the natural kingdom don't behave the same way human things do.
Right. So would you say it would be okay to do a tetrad on awe?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah,
I would
good.
also say it's very difficult though,
Yeah.
because the hardest part of a tetrad for me is always retrieve,
Oh, totally. Always.
because the other ones, enhance, obsolesce, reverse, they're fairly straightforward. You can work them out. I mean, the flip reverse thing takes a bit more imagination,
Yeah.
but you can work them out. Retrieve requires knowledge. You have to know what's there to be retrieved, or to figure that out. You can't speculate on, or maybe you can. In any case, to say that X artifact retrieves Y from the past is very, very hard to do unless you know a lot about the past. And this would be the problem with doing a tetrad on something like awe, because awe is such a seemingly primal characteristic of humans. You could even say it's an innovation. You could argue that.
Yeah.
It goes so far back, just like humor or laughing. It goes so far back that how could you imagine what it might retrieve? I don't know. I think the answer would be that it retrieves something which is possibly not human.
Yeah. Beautiful layout, because we did a tetrad on comedy the other day.
Oh, good.
Laughter is probably innate. That's what I sort of think. Laughter is innate in humans, but comedy and joking are invented. But here's the thing, the
Well,
retrieve.
laughter is the West medicine.
Say it again.
I said laughter is the West medicine.
The West, W-E-S-T.
That's a joke.
That's Gurdjieff said laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no.
That's a good one.
That's a good. But here's the thing: I've done this
Mm.
retrieve, difficulty situation for years. I go, look it's easy. Because I know some big time media ecologists who go, the tetrad, what does this retrieve? They diss the tetrad, sort of. Literally. They might kind of
They're
go
welcome.
along, huh?
And they're
Yeah,
welcome
but
to.
no, I know.
It's
They're
fine.
welcome to it. And it's like, I always say, Marshall didn't invent these 4 questions. They've been around forever. It's just like him and Eric just sort of put them together and go and come up with a 4th. But the retrieval I love, because it's like, what? And I go, don't worry about time. What does it bring back that was previously obsolescent? I go, throw time out the window. Don't worry about time. All times are happening now. And the easy answer for retrieve is the campfire, the water cooler talk. It is every human invention, in my opinion, was invented so you could connect to another human being. That's why we invented anything, was to share or connect or deal with other humans. So everything retrieves the campfire, which is community, sort of. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, there's a bunch of things there. For one, I agree. I think that it's what makes us human is humanity,
Yeah,
community, like you say, caring about
yeah,
each other, giving a damn.
yeah,
Uh, the tetrad thing, yeah, you know what? Certain people have a hard time with it,
yeah,
because the people that have a hard time with it are the people who don't have a very good sense of humor, who don't like to play, who are very rigid, and like hard categories, and easy answers. You know, anything you can arrive at logically is an easy answer, I think.
yeah,
Um, and relying on that, and it's fine as far as it goes. You know what? Like Marshall said, you don't like that idea, I got others. And the basic message there is, hey, whatever works for you. If this doesn't work for you, let's not waste time arguing about it. Let's find something that does work. Let's move on, because I got shit to do. So I don't want to, seriously. But
yeah,
the tetrad, one thing that the tetrad can be scary for people who aren't willing to play, and who don't understand that play is the way just about anything is discovered, you know, uh, invented, discovered. It's by asking, oh, well, hey, what happens if I do this? Or, oh, that's kind of funny. It's being open to different results than what you're looking for or expecting. That's when the big things are found. The other thing people have a hard time with the tetrad, I think, is that they want to make it into things which it's not. They want to make it into a linear thing, how it started, A, B, C, D. They want to know that first it enhances something, then it obsolesces something, then it retrieves something, and then then it reverses something. And the idea of simultaneity is uncomfortable, for good reason. I don't need to explain to you, or probably anybody watching this, why simultaneity is uncomfortable for academics, print POBs that they are, right? But the other thing that is hard about the tetrad for people is they see a question, they think there must be one answer.
yeah,
So and that's not the case with the tetrad. It's rarely one answer, right? There's several answers. Some are maybe better or more useful than others. And the other thing is that you gotta be prepared to work on something, to chew it over, to let it boil. Like, how often do you ever do a tetrad, boom, 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 boom? Oftentimes one part you get hung up on a little bit. It takes a while. You come back to it. And then tweaking it. Like, I mean, I'm not an expert on the tetrad. I'm still very much learning about it. And it's intimidating because there's levels of it, right? I'm working on going deeper into it. And oddly enough, it equates with my poetic process, because early on in life, I didn't like to edit things, with poetry and with creative things, but especially poetry. I sit down and I write it out, and what I come out with, it's done, right? I didn't even like to fix typos. I just printed it as it was. But editing is like another level, right? Leveling up.
yeah,
Think about The Wasteland, right? Think about The Wasteland as Eliot wrote it, and then think about it as Pound massaged it, right?
yeah,
4 parts into 5, into what we know now. That's due to editing. And is the one better than the other? They're different. They're useful for different things. So the next level of tetrad is, working with raw materials and coming up with the best shaped thing, working out harmony, and the relation. How does how do these two mesh with those two parts? That's something I'm still very much learning. That's the next level tetrad stuff.
Yeah, dude, that was amazing because you brought up so much. One on the poetry. We're going to get into poetry soon. Is Allen Ginsberg said first thought, best thought. So that's a good sensibility with your poetry. But I love you said where the bigger things are found. That's because if you do the tetrad and realize Marshall was deep into Finnegan's Wake, that is more percept than concept, And Joyce said you can find everydayness. I mean, you can find epiphanies in everydayness. You don't have to read highbrow intellectual literature. You can just stub your toe. It doesn't mean you should do all of it, but you can find epiphanies in everydayness. And one last thing on the tetrad before we jump on is we're always saying, come up with a fifth question. And one of our brilliant people, Duncan, said, if, say, the tetrad subject was awe, if there never was awe, then what? So, if there never was comedy, then what? And, people go, it would be a horrible world. It's a really beautiful question because it is sort of like the fourth. Yeah. And there have been explorations into fifth. What does it satirize? What is it? There's some great articles in the archives right in back of you that talk about coming up with a fifth step. So it's a fun tool. So let's go on. The next question is, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. That's a poet, Audre Lorde. Yvonne Rainer said, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, there's a lot of things right there. I don't know if I agree. I'm not trying to be contrarian with every question you bring up here, but I mean, I think the master's tools are the best tools to dismantle his house, her house.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a good jumping off point. I'm not saying it's just a lot of times I quote these cute quotes before the question, but the question is basically you don't have to apply the quote, but I agree with you. That's like George Lakoff says, in order to dismantle the master's house, you got to use his or their tools and invent new tools. So that's like, and then Yvonne Rainer says, oh no, expose the tools. Well, that's part of the process too. But I mean, just in general, what new tool do you suggest or sort of gravitate towards right now?
Oh, what new tool? I don't know. You know what? I think I love the idea of repurposing tools.
Yeah.
Because tools can be versatile. Being a craftsman, I work a lot with tools. My workshop is next door here, and when you're I guess when you're a craftsperson, everything, you have a tool mindset, and I certainly do. It's the same approach I bring to my McLuhan work is a tools-based one, a practical-based one. And there's a saying that there's nothing like the right tool for the job, right? Yeah. And it's so true because in my workshop, if you don't have just the right socket, you're messing around with different pliers and all the other stuff, and it takes you 10 times as long as if you had the right tool. But sometimes this is where improvisation comes in, right? And how you can find new uses for old tools. There's no tool like an old tool, and I think that's a really interesting subject. Just to come back again to the idea of invention versus discovery. Why you can waste a lot of time trying to think up something new when you might have something really good to hand that is more efficient than trying to figure out something new. This drive
Yeah.
for novelty is it's fine, but my dad said at one point how he feels so bad for academics coming up today because the push is to cite the latest research, blah 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 2020 wrote, and then et cetera, and all 2021. And that's just kind of an in-club back scratching self-justification. Is that he feels bad for people only concerned with the latest research because they're leaving so much behind.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
I don't have the greatest memory. So what would my earliest memory be?
Or just one?
Just one.
Well, yeah, just briefly, one early memory you have.
Well, I do remember one of the first poems I ever wrote. I don't know how old I was. I had to have been, this can't be a very early memory, but I suppose it's all relative. I wrote this poem. I stopped for a moment to observe a chirping bird. Then a seagull shit on me, so I shot the fucker.
Wow. And that's
I don't know why
approx
that stuck with me.
Yeah.
But, just for contrast, and don't read too much into this, but I opened my book of poetry that was published this year with a poem my son wrote, my son Ezra. I should say he composed when he was 3 years old. And we just had bath time, and he's wrapped in his towel and having a post-bath cuddle sitting on my lap. And he said this to me, and I remembered it because I was like, damn, I got to remember that. And I remembered it and wrote it down and asked his permission to put it in the front of my book. So he opens my book with this. I hurt my angels, and my angels got tangled in 5 angles.
Oh, a 3-year-old said that?
3 years old. I hurt my angels, and my angels got tangled in 5 angles. I mean, I just about hung up my hat.
He invented the 5th step of the tetrad there. 5.
I wouldn't put it past that.
That's
Right?
DNA. That is the McLuhan DNA bubbling. Truly. That's right from Marshall's mom to Marshall, to Eric, to you, to Ezra. What an amazing. So is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Gosh, that's hard. That's a hard question, Jerry. Is memory more a curse or a blessing? I suppose it's situational, but on balance, curse. A curse. Our memories hold us back from so much,
Amazing.
especially the painful ones.
Yeah.
The painful ones are the hardest ones to let go. In particular for a lot of people when it comes to love. You get stung. It makes it really hard to want to be vulnerable and open again, right?
Yeah.
So in that kind of sense.
See, what I'm really looking for is this. I find commonality in the answers. 80 to 90, probably 98% say, well, blessing, memory's a blessing. And then they'll go, well, I guess it could be a curse. And so you went with curse. So I'm not holding you to it, but it's like, it's enlightening for me when people go off the norm, because I've done this for 40 years and there's so many normalities, which is fine. I'm not saying our commonality is bad or anything. I'm just saying it's fun when it. So what were you raised a particular religion?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you know this.
You were raised Roman Catholic?
very much. Yeah.
Are you still practicing?
No, no.
What age
Um,
what age did you check out approximately?
I guess around 14, 15.
Do you pray?
Um, yeah, yeah, I do. And
If God
I haven't written off, religion or Catholicism even. But it's hard. It's hard, especially knowing the kind of stuff that the church has gotten up to and is unapologetic for. I have a hard time overlooking that. A very, very hard time, especially since in Canada yesterday, we had the first national Day of Remembrance. What was it even called? It was an outcome of what we call, I don't, you probably haven't heard of it. Canada conducted something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission between 2008 and 2015 to explore what the government did to the indigenous people of this land over the 150 years of its existence, the country that is. And yesterday was the first National Day of Remembrance in honor of truth and reconciliation. And the Catholic Church, among other churches, played a really awful role in abuse of the indigenous people of this land.
Yeah.
Did truly awful things and refused to apologize for it. And
Wow.
that to me is a big
Yeah.
problem, a very big problem.
Yeah.
So it's now my father would say that the church is not the church. If that makes
Right.
any sense. The people are
Yeah.
not the church, you know.
Yeah.
But to me, that rings a bit hollow, and is a bit of an answer of convenience.
Yeah.
So anyway, I do go to
No,
church
that's
from time to
interesting.
time.
Yeah. But Eric didn't basically check out. He stayed a practicing Catholic.
Oh, oh yeah, he very much. He was one of the most religious and devout people I've ever known. He, yeah, it was whenever we'd go to do talks, for some reason we more often than not ended up at a Catholic institution, college, university, whatnot. And he would always want to go to their chapel. The last place we were in Colombia, Universidad de la Sabana, was founded by Opus Dei, I believe, Catholic order. I forget the name of the priest, Jesuit priest who started it anyway. They had a chapel there, a very small chapel. And yeah, dad asked for a minute while we were having the tour to go in and pray. And he'd go in and pray. And he'd want to, if there was a mass, he would go to mass, just like Marshall would, you know.
Yeah.
He had a place here in the office that he would pray. And he started his day off that way. He ended his day off that way. Sometimes he would break from study, pray, and it brings comfort to me because I know how much comfort it brought to him.
Yeah.
In particular, there was somebody he was especially devoted to by the name of Saint Teresa. Teresa, who they called the Little Flower, fascinating figure. Anyway, she's represented by the symbol of the rose, and this had a funny way of working out in Colombia because Colombia's national flower is the rose, and my dad's last journal entry before he died, the morning he died, wrote about us going down to breakfast, and all the tables had roses on them, fresh roses. And to him, that was a sign, and he wrote it, that Saint Teresa was with us.
Wow.
And that's a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful. So well put. Thank you, Andrew. If God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Nothing.
That is a good answer. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
These are great questions. You probably get that all the time. Evil exists. There's no doubt. And becoming a parent, if you didn't think it before, becoming a parent helps you understand that. Evil exists. And I have to say evil people exist. Although people can change for better or worse.
Yeah.
I have to believe that.
This question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But again, I'm going to set it up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts, but the basic question is, how do you, Andrew, advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you, or how do you, what do you think about the Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
I don't think so. I think if you obsess over your enemies, if you spend a lot of time thinking about them, you empower them for sure.
Yeah.
It's stupid not to acknowledge your enemies.
Yeah.
You know, it's if you have enemies, it's good to to know them. I also don't believe in the keep your friends close and enemies closer thing either.
Yeah.
It's like, no, keep your enemies distant. Keep an eye on them. But shit, why would I want my enemies closer than my friends? That makes zero sense.
That well, it's also bringing up indigenous Indian people. Just quick insert is that the Indians say your enemy's your best teacher. So again, do you want your best teacher really close, or do you want them a little distant, especially if they're throwing spears at you or something?
Well, this was Marshall and Eric's attitude as well. Not, so much enemies, but critics. They said, your critics are great. Nobody works harder for you for free.
Right.
Critics are happy to point out all the things you miss or need to work on, all the typos in your thing, all the loopholes in your arguments. They're a great resource.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Sam.
But again,
Sam we got that from Marshall, or he said, Sam Goldwyn quote, as for your critics, don't even ignore them.
Yeah, right? Yeah. But I got lost in your quotes again and missed the question.
Yeah, the basic question is, how do you advise? Like Ezra comes to you, I have an enemy on this playground. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy?
Oh yeah, I always advocate the kill them with kindness method.
Yeah.
And you have to know when to cut when something's not worth your time. I really am a humanitarian, and I believe I really think we're here to help each other.
Yeah.
I have a hard time writing people off, whether I like them or not. And I think everybody deserves love, hurt people, there's so many, it's trite, but hurt people. A little love can go along. Love is so much more powerful than hurt or hate. It really is. But hate gets all the PR, gets all the press. But so I always lead with love. That's what I say.
Dude, kill him with kindness. That is a beautiful thing. It's really a theme here. So James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago.
Really?
Volta Cinema. Yeah, he basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
It's a good question. I was a projectionist up until about a year ago. Uh, well, it's because it's because of all these extensions we've made of ourselves. We put ourselves outside of ourselves, and every time we do that, things don't make sense. So we have to remake them so that they do make sense. But then usually in the process of that, we we come up with new ways of doing things, and then those don't make sense anymore. So it's this slippery slope that we definitely are the victims of our own ingenuity.
Yeah. The great, you brought it up in your talk on YouTube I was listening to, is beautiful. And you said, Culkin taught Marshall, we shape our tools, then they shape us. But I think John Culkin got it from, or Marshall sort of reiterated it, because Winston Churchill said, "We shape our buildings and then
Mhm.
they shape us." And then they
Mhm.
sort of said, "Well, change buildings to tools. Everything we invent then turns around and shapes us." But on the album your dad or your that Marshall did, which is an amazing album. John Simon, the producer of that, produced everybody. Janis Joplin, the Medium is a Massage album is amazing album. If you listen really close, the parrot voice goes, "We shape our tools, then they ape us." They changed it to the word ape.
That's
So I
great.
I loved when you said we put ourselves inside ourselves. That is a true extension of that whole phenomenon. Through our extensions, we put ourselves inside ourselves. That's heavy. So what what first attracted to you? You've had like several, you're like these things they call hyphenated careers. I love it. It's like that's the wisest thing I was ever taught, was don't specialize. When we're all, what are you going to be when you grow up, Andrew? So, you got into being a craftsman, furniture upholsterer, you got into being a teacher and a poet, and you got into being a musician and a punk rocker. Let's just take them one at a time. What led you to pursuing poetry? Like Ezra shoots it out at 3. I mean, how did you hear poetry around the house or read it and then go, "I want to do that"?
I have no idea, honestly.
But I mean, were
Um,
you listening were you going to school and they were teaching you poetry and you came home?
no, no, because school just about killed poetry for me.
Right.
I had this teacher in grade 3. I won't name her because maybe it's not fair. But I had this teacher who just about killed poetry for me because is a left brain right brain thing. And the assignment was she put a poem on the board, and the assignment was copy it, write it down, word for word. So I did. It was like a 4-line poem. What I did was it was 4 short lines. I didn't want to waste paper, so I just wrote it all in 1 line, right? I spelled everything right, and I handed it in. It was given back to me and said, "That's wrong, do it again." I go, "Okay, I'm looking it over. It looked good to me." So I did it again. Like, "No, no, no, that's wrong." And this went on till eventually she said, you know, "This is 4 lines. You wrote it in 1 line." I'm like, "Well, you could have said that and saved both of us a headache." But it just about killed poetry for me, because it's like, no, that's not poetry. That's not what poetry is about at all. Like, it was very frustrating, but it didn't. You can't kill poetry for me. I tried, kind of. I mean, thing is, like you said, I guess I'm hyphenated. I have so many interests, especially extracurricular stuff. I'm really into music. I'm into art. I'm into all kinds of stuff. But there's only so many hours in the day, right? And I became a father and a husband, and there were even fewer hours in the day if you want to be present and a good person to your people, which I do. So I had to kind of decide what was most important, and at the time it wasn't poetry. So I took a break from writing poetry for a while, a few years even, really. And at some point, maybe it was about 2 years ago, I hadn't been writing poetry, and I asked myself, am I still a poet? And I thought about it for a while, and I finally realized that if I ever was a poet, I'm still a poet. Because, as I've also said, writing is the least poetic act. Okay? And what I mean by that is poetry is an experience. It's a way of carrying yourself and how you experience the world and how you relate to the world. And you don't have to write a single word to be a poet, according to that definition. Now, of course, I do love writing. I take a lot of care in my writing, even more these days than ever. So when I figured that out, I was like, oh, that was a big relief. It's like, okay, I'm still a poet. And I started writing again. And that's, I ended up with this book of poetry, and I've got an even bigger project I'm into right now. And it's exciting again. Poetry is and will always be relevant because we have a lot of ways of knowing things. But poetry is one particular way of knowing things that you can't fake it another way. It's the only way to find out certain things.
Andrew, that was beautiful.
Let's still.
Whoa, we're getting an echo here.
Getting an echo here.
Clinton, can you get rid of that echo? So anyways, let's stay on poetry for a second here. A screenwriting teacher told me great film or great art or a great poem is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film or great poem is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process writing a poem?
Well, very little and very much. That is, I rarely sit down with an objective other than to write something, than to relate something, than to find something. I don't very often have an objective such as, I want to do this particular thing. Although sometimes I do. It depends. I do a little bit of both. A lot of my writing in my book of poetry is mostly things that were just kind of, it's like fishing, right? Like you throw the line in the water just to try and catch something. You don't necessarily think, well, I want to catch this fish, although some people do. But it's a fishing expedition. But then sometimes, I have an object in mind. Like sometimes I'll take on commissions. I was doing poetic portraits for a while, and for $100, I'll interview you, and then like a painter would do a portrait, I'll do a poetic portrait. So I'll interview you, and we'll have a conversation, or you'll tell me about this person, and I'll do kind of the Cyrano de Bergerac thing. and I'll try and capture some part of their likeness in words, not in paint. So that's a little more intentional. But the most fun I have with poetry is when I just set out to see what's out there.
Beautiful. Duchamp says there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your reader when you're writing your poem?
That's a great question. That's I think about that a lot. Not much is the answer. It's tricky because I've learned so much about audience and author, and how they're reliant on each other or not. For myself, when I'm writing poetry anyway, and actually I have to kind of equivocate because of the two different kinds of poems I just described to you. The one, I'm very much thinking about my audience, and most of my writing, I am my audience. I am the audience, because I see myself as a go-between, and almost the audience is almost a secondary audience, where I'm kind of the first audience, a bit of a reporter.
It's good. Let's shift to music and your love for music for a second. My friend has this theory that the 3 T's, the tenets of music are taste, theory, and technique. So theory, you can learn what chords are doing, it's in the G key or whatever. Technique is you can get your chops together. But how does one acquire taste? And it could apply to poetry too. Like, how do you acquire? I think it's the word is kind of taste is like aesthetics of what you like and what you dislike. How do you acquire? How does one acquire taste in music and poetry?
Well, there are two different ways. There's some people say you can't buy taste, right? And of course you can. But taste can come two ways. Through either, taste is generally sometimes hard to distinguish between taste and popularity, right? This was the brilliant thing about practical criticism, was that they discovered that it is quite arbitrary, very little to do with any kind of merit, but more about what everybody agreed was good, or worthy. That was the scandal about practical criticism. Taste can be developed either by paying attention to what other people are interested in and sort of going by the consensus, or what's more difficult is by figuring out what appeals to you. This is a bit of a moving target as well, because as we know, taste is a function of our sensory balances. What's appealing depends on how our senses are tuned. So, today's music sounds awful to an older person's ears because their ears are tuned a certain way, but it sounds great to the present generation. And then another 20 years down the road, they'll be horrified by the newest stuff and find comfort in the old. So, but I'll argue there's a fourth. Was it taste theory? What was the third? Taste and theory and
taste, theory, and technique. What's the other one?
The other one is much more difficult and something you can't fake, as as Bootsy Collins said, you can't fake the funk.
Good God, you making my day, bro.
Soul,
yeah,
soul.
So
soul is the fourth element.
Soul is the other T we could add. Soul, yeah.
Soul is what raises the goosebumps when you encounter art. Dude, and you can't fake that. You can't fake that. You can't. You can't synthesize it. You can't teach it. You can only feel it.
Yeah. Well, I know these interviews go great when one of us cries, and that made me cry because, I'm serious, Andrew. It really brought a tear to my eye deep
Mhm.
because I'm totally into funk. And Pee Wee Ellis just died, and this
Oh,
guy is just the guy who is the architect with James Brown to invent Cold Sweat because he heard Miles Davis do 2 chords. So he goes, I can do that. And he wrote Say It Loud, I'm Black, I'm Proud with James Brown. This guy is a
gee.
major,
You
major.
know, maybe you know about this. Marshall's interview on the Dick Cavett show. He
Yeah,
mentions he mentions he's talking to the one guy. He says, "I was talking to James Brown last week."
I
Just
heard
throws his,
that.
and it's like, "Excuse me, Marshall, you were talking to James Brown last week? Like, can we rewind a little bit and talk about what the heck that was?" Because I've been keeping my eyes and ears out for any kind of,
Yeah,
like, when did James Brown and Marshall McLuhan hook up? When did
yeah,
that happen?
yeah.
God.
No, that dude,
But
it's
but
because I'm
yeah,
watching.
funk,
Yeah. You
I've been playing
nailed it.
bass lately.
Yeah. You've been
Yeah, I
playing
like
bass? Yeah.
bass.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
you nailed it because I'm deep into the, Muhammad Ali documentary. My friend Stephanie Jenkins helped produce it. And it's like,
Okay.
I'm a white kid. I'm growing up. James Brown, Muhammad Ali, Jimi Hendrix, they're my heroes. That's it. So when you make a
Mm.
6-hour doc on Muhammad Ali and you layer it with James Brown and Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Wonder music, it's like, what could be better? It's just making me like, as much as I would cringe, Ken Burns should do the 6-hour doc on Marshall. I mean, somebody should do the thorough, huge thing. This is like, what? But that was beautiful. Quoting Bootsy Collins to me is like the highest art form. It's like when Cornell West, I'm telling you, Andrea, really, when Cornell West is talking really beautiful language. I love how he does language. And he goes, like my brother Bootsy Collins says, and like my sister Bessie Smith says, I'm like, he's talking my lifeblood. That gets to me.
Amen.
Yeah.
I
No,
saw Dr. West one time. Strangers in the
yeah.
Night. I was standing out front of. I was in New York City. Um, we were put up at a hotel across from the Met, and Dr. Cornell West walked by in a tuxedo. Like, damn, that was Dr. West. I didn't say anything,
Yeah.
but
But that was enough, just
brush
being
with
in his
greatness.
presence. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're the great Marshall said, this line, everything we invent extends some humanness. Clothing's extension of our skin. What does the writing utensil extend for you in regards to poetry? What humanness is extended by whether it's a keyboard or a pencil? When you're writing a poem, what humanness is extended through that writing utensil?
Through that writing utensil. Well,
Well, no, you
um,
don't have to say through. It's like, what does it extend? What does the writing utensil extend would probably be the better way to word it. Yeah.
mm, um, I suppose uh, it extends, among other things, is my voice
Yeah.
at its most basic.
Yeah.
It's magic. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah.
How, and this is the title, not to keep plugging my book or anything, but the title of my book is Written Matter.
Yeah.
And that's because that's what a word on a page is. It's my voice turned into something you can see. It's matter, written, written matter, and that is magic.
Yeah.
That is deep magic.
Yeah. In Andrew, I'm still going to encourage you to join at least once one of our many Finnegan's Wake reading clubs on Zoom, and we do Carl Jung and we do Ulysses now, but we've been doing Dante. And this guy who runs the Dante Reading Club, Divine Comedy, Max is a neuroscientist. He blends neuroscience and Ulysses. I says, what
Okay.
does the he's a poet too. I says, what does the writing utensil extend? He goes, tears. I thought that was a heavy answer. What humanness is extended, you know, through your writing utensil, you know?
Oh, well, that's a very telling answer.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
one of a very strange and beautiful experience I had was years ago. Dad was in Bologna for an MEA thing. I think it was Bologna, and he sat down at a table in a cafeteria beside a nun. Um, Struck up a conversation. The nun, whose name was Sister Holloway, I forget her first name off the top, was there for a Dante um, conference. Turns out she's a very highly regarded Dante scholar. So when Dad and I were in Rome a few years back, uh, he wanted to go up to Florence, to Firenze, to visit Sister Holloway, um, and or is it Bolton? Now I'm getting confused. I'm pretty sure it's Holloway, but anyway, it turns out that this woman, this sister, um, was the caretaker of what they called the English cemetery in Florence, and it's the poets' cemetery. Apparently, all kinds of uh, notable poets, English poets, are buried here in Florence, and it was the coolest thing because it's this cemetery that it's like an island in the road. Like a road comes down and splits around the cemetery and then joins up again on the other side. And this cemetery is just there with all these poets in it. And it was this is a very memorable experience. Uh, we got on a train from Rome to travel. We spent the better part of a day just going there and back to have dinner with and meet this woman, this Dante scholar, who was um, her mission at the time was taking care of the Roma population, who are horribly oppressed peoples in Europe, and she's teaching them how to read. It's a remarkable thing.
Beautiful. We'll track her down because Maximo will know her because he's from Italy. He's from Italy, but he's based in Dublin now. But
I have a
it's
feeling her
just
name is Sister Julia Bolton,
okay.
but Holloway must be in there somewhere as well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'll
she's the caretaker of the English cemetery.
yeah. I'll definitely research it out. So, what do you think? What's your hunch was the motive of the cave artist?
Of the cave artist?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that again comes down to magic, I think.
Yeah. What's another word for magic? How do you define what magic is? Or not define, but just suss out what you mean by magic.
Hmm. I think magic is um, those things that we can't define. It's a
Yeah.
kind of paradox about it. It's
Yeah.
it's kind of like formal cause. It's it's elusive. It's it's hard. It's not quite so simple as a plus b plus c equals d. Or 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals 4. It's like 2 plus 3 equals 23.
That's
Yeah,
right.
magic is. Yeah.
That's Robert Anton Wilson. Frank Zappa begins his song. 1 plus 1 equals 11. 2 plus 2 equals 22. People go, no, that's wrong. Well, no. If you put a 1 in a 1, okay, then that's a perfect lead, and you must have ESP. Is perception reality?
Yeah.
That is certainty.
Well,
I like,
but not all reality is perceivable.
yeah. No, I'm happy with your answer. Coleman Miller made the greatest fake experimental film ever, Uso Josto, and I says, "Is perception reality?" And he goes, "That's all you got."
It is, yeah. I mean, that's McLuhan 101, I kind of think. Uh,
T.S. Eliot said that poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
oh boy. Well, for one thing, I think there's a lot more to it than that. Uh, as a poet, I'm not just outering my inner dialogue. I'm I'm a conduit for who knows
Yeah.
what. Really. So it's not to say anything against Mr. Eliot. He knew his business. I've learned a lot from him. I'm kind of wading through his selected essays right now because several of them were very highly recommended to me, especially Tradition and the Individual Talent. That one is so deep. It's short, but it's so deep. You know, no man is an island. Nobody exists unto themselves. Uh, it, being alone is such an illusion. So we're not alone. That's the thing about humans. You know, we got each other, and we come from somewhere. We stand on the shoulders. You know, and for anybody to feel alone, it's a lack of imagination. It really is, uh, because we're so supported. Uh, and I got lost in your question, but
No,
or
that was
rather,
you really Andrew, you taught me a lot there. That was amazing. And again, in twice in a row, you've anticipated the next question with that. But it's basically what language is your inner dialogue in?
uh, it's not in a language.
Ah, that's perfect. That's that another great experimental filmmaker, Abigail Child. What language is your inner dialogue in? She goes, I wish I knew.
No, this is it. Language is translating your inner dialogue.
It is. No, a lot of people go English. I goes, nah, what form is your inner consciousness in? They'll
Yeah.
go,
It's
I,
translation all the way down.
yeah. It's like TV commercials or mine's in visuals or music or whatever. But do artists have a moral obligation?
Some do,
Yeah.
some don't.
Yeah. But here's the question you anticipated. So George Manupelli, not far from you in Ann Arbor, started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. Cinema's only 130 years, so it's like half the time. He says his mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas, an East Coast experimental film pioneer, says there's no self-expression. Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Like you said, a conduit. Is art making, poetry making, whatever, more self-expression or more you're a vehicle for whatever culture is dominant? Whatever culture or technology is dominant, what does it sort of lean towards more? I know it's both or it depends.
Well, it's all self-expression, uh, art or technology. It's all self-expression.
Oh, that is good. No one's ever said that. So the technology is self-expression too. Well,
Well, that's the
because what I'm
expressions of man.
yeah, it's pretty heavy because see what I'm fishing for is people to go, oh no, it's more uh whatever technology or culture is dominant. So the guy from Negative Land said, yeah, Missy Elliott learned how to sing from car alarms. in jet Ginger Baker, one of the greatest drummers ever. They said, how'd you get your drum sound? He said, I was in London when they were bombing. So all night I heard this boom, 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 boom. And if you listen to his drum style, which pretty much dominates rock great drummers, it sounds like a bunch of bombs going off.
Yeah.
So
Style
can
style
art
is such a trap.
say it again?
I said style is such a trap. It's my biggest beef with the art world, with art schools, as there's this
Yeah.
drive. They do the worst thing to artists by telling them to discover their style.
Yes.
It's the worst thing. Art isn't about a style, you know. Art is about evolution, you know. And if to stubbornly cling to a style is stifling. That's when style turns to stifle, because you stop being an artist and you're just a machine. And machines churn out the same thing over and over and over. Artists have to be nimble.
That is good. What's nimble mean? Artists have to be nimble.
Yeah, responsive.
Responsive. The Responsive Chord, Tony Schwartz. What a book.
That is, so if you ask about the morality, it's responsibility.
Yeah.
Your ability to respond. That is the moral imperative.
That is, words evoke more than their meaning. That is heavy, dude. Okay, so can art making be egoless?
No, I don't think so. You're necessarily a part of things, and you can try and minimize how much of a part that is, but you can't remove it. The only way to remove it is to remove yourself, and at that point, you're not artist but audience.
Yeah. That's interesting because is that when Marshall, I always say the great thing about Marshall is one of them was the mid-career, he updated Medium as a Massage to users content. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's no longer that, I'm switching it. And is that user as content? What you're saying is remove yourself?
I suppose it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you remove yourself when you publish, or when you ship the painting, or when you record the track. I think that's when you remove yourself. But a book is a beginning,
Yeah.
not the product.
They caught Picasso sneaking into an art museum once and touching
Good.
up one
Good.
and he goes, and the guard goes, "You can't do that." He goes, "Hey, I'm the artist." He goes, you still can't do that. You can't touch the thing."
I love that. That's hilarious.
So tell me one major element of your creative process. Let's just say in all your upholstery, in your teaching, in your poetry, just in general, one major element that stayed the same and one major element that's changed. And I mean, you can be specific in your however you want to answer it.
I always start with love. Like I said, love is where everything starts. That remains the same. To start everywhere else is a waste of time, and doesn't lead to anything good. And anything that doesn't lead to something good is a waste of time, I think. Um, sorry, that sounds really
That's
self-indulgent.
beautiful. You don't
But
have to be sorry. That's beautiful. That's what I want people to propagate is that's bottom line, you know, it's like duh. But why not?
yeah, no, I think we're here to grow, to improve, to leave things better than how we
Yeah,
found them,
yeah.
and love is the best way to do that. Um, what's changed? Oh man, a lot. Because it all changes, right? It comes back to the art thing. It all changes. Um, I think looking change can be scary to us in this world. Less so, I think, today. More people realize that it just is. Change is. It's not something to be afraid of. Fear isn't going to help you very much. What's changed, I think, is my approach, um, my way of seeing, because I'm always trying to. I'm always one of my favorite questions is what am I missing? You know, what am I not seeing? What am I not hearing right now? Because we miss so much. We really do. Um, every day, everything we do as humans, there's this impulse to take all these shortcuts. Uh, it's the efficiency impulse, right? As we miss so much in our rush to get from A to B. We miss so much beauty. You know, when we slow down or speed up or whatever. Um, I always like to try and discover what I'm missing, what I'm missing, and that.
Beautiful. Andrew, that is so beautiful because it resonates with Marshall's line. What haven't you noticed lately?
Nice.
That's a great it is really good. And you didn't quote him, you said it in your own ways. What am I missing? So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell us a weakness that you've turned into a strength. Or in McLuhan world, it would be tell me a breakdown you turned into a breakthrough.
Hmm. I mean, kind of McLuhan work is my breakdown is breakthrough. Really.
But what is the
uh,
what is the weakness or the breakdown? I can understand what the breakthrough is. You're doing workshops with gray areas. You're spreading the word. But what was the breakdown?
well, I suppose it would have to be the pandemic as my most recent breakdown is breakthrough. Since you brought up gray area, it really made it possible for me to do this deep dive into understanding media, UMI, understanding media intensive. Although UMI, I am you, UMI, there's a lot of fun to be had there.
Yeah.
Um, but I started it just about a year ago, and it was made possible because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was not something I would have considered doing otherwise, because the internet right now is kind of like New York City. You know, uh, I couldn't offer this understanding media course here where I live, somewhere in between Bloomfield and Wellington, Ontario. Um, who would come? Who would t- 3 hours a week, for almost 40 weeks? Who would come? Nobody.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the thing about New York City, right? Is you can have um, like a store that rents video cassettes only on grindcore, like horror genre stuff. You can support
Yeah.
that in New York City. Um,
Yeah.
you can't support that here.
Yeah.
Uh, Same goes with my McLuhan course. You can support it with the internet. Because of the internet, and because of gray area, shout out, I was able to connect with 20 to 40 people who are out there and are interested, and maybe that's all there are in the world who would pay for me to do this. Um, And it's only because of the pandemic that became a realistic thing for me to do, because my furniture business was on hold. I wasn't going into anybody's house and picking up their furniture and working on it and delivering it back to them. Like, that wasn't a thing. So I kind of fell into this teaching career, which has been, it's kind of funny because when I first decided I wanted to do the McLuhan thing, I thought, okay, well, I'll have to go to university and get a bachelor's and then a master's and then a PhD, and then maybe I'll be able to one day be able to take over the Center for Culture and Technology, right? But there were so many obstacles to me doing that. For one thing, I graduated high school, but all I wanted to do was graduate. So I didn't do any of the like grade 13 preparatory to university courses. So years ago, when I was looking at doing it, I would have had to have done a year of like pre-university courses before I even got to start on my BA. And that was just not going to happen. But it turns out I don't need a PhD to teach. And that's been a great thing, because it means it gives me so much freedom. I wouldn't do well in a university. What a rat race that is. I feel so sorry for my academic friends. It's really it's a beautiful idea, but it's a poisonous reality in so many times, which is too bad. It's really in an awful state. But
it definitely has its services and disservices. But
it does, yeah.
Yeah, Andrew,
And the
we're
services
sort of
are
running.
great.
Yeah, we're sort of running down to our, because we asked for 90 minutes and you've given us. Can you go more than 10 more, 15 more minutes, or you got to end at in 7?
Yeah, we can go a little longer.
Okay, just so I know, because then we're going to bring in Clinton soon.
Oh, yeah.
Just a couple more.
Sure.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Hi.
Good. Andrew, how do you find peace of mind?
Oh, looking out the window. I was sitting here looking out the
Oh,
window, talking to a friend of mine the other day, and somebody rides by on a horse. This is where I live. It's a tractor
oh,
or a horse. There's a dirt road that runs up here. It's not hard to find peace of mind where I live, because I live on, it's a farm. My younger son, Virgil, called it the word farm, and I love that. This is very much a word farm. So
that is,
peace of mind is just, you know what? You got to focus on what brings peace. And
yeah.
to me, that's focus on the love in your life, and it's there. It is there. It's everywhere you look. You have to work hard not to see it, in fact. So if you want to find peace, look for love. And, look outside, look within, whatever. But look outside, because we really are surrounded by love, especially on a beautiful day like this.
It's beautiful here, and it really resonates with George Carlin said, "Whatever happened to letting kids stare out the window?" You know, like it's a beautiful thing to find peace of mind. Staring out a window is really well put. Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive
Not
emotion
the window.
when, yeah, this window right
Oh,
here.
I'm sorry. I talked over you.
No,
Please
that's all
repeat,
right.
Jerry.
Anger can be a productive emotion when, fill in the blank.
When you plug in your amp.
That's a true musician, punk rocker, yeah. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Wow. Tell me something good I never had and never want. Shoot. I can't answer that question. on the grounds that it would incriminate me.
That is a good answer. Okay, you deserve this one then for answering that so well. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Probably add to the vomit.
Oh my God, I've never had that answer either. Okay, Clinton, I know you're there. We'll bring Clinton on. This has truly been enlightening, Andrew. And okay, Clinton, it's all yours, dude. Let's hear it. And then I'll ask a couple at the end, but Clinton, go ahead.
Sure. Well, I kind of found something interesting. There was a question early on, Andrew, that you sort of evaded that I think you answered later on. So I'd like to go back to it now, because you mentioned that soul was the fourth T of music, insofar as how Jerry put the question about the three T's, and if you can't fake funk, right, that the soul is being so integral to that. So I'd like to go back to the Alan Turing question and sort of combine your answer to the question you evaded, which is creativity a function of the soul?
You can't fake the function. I don't know. Is creativity a function of the soul?
That's good. Can't fake.
That's awesome. We're not alone. No man is an island. To feel alone is a lack of imagination. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between an individual and someone who's alienated?
That's perspective.
What perspective is missing for the person who's alienated, you think?
Well, I mean, I think it can be a fine line between the individual and the alienated, because an individual is necessarily alienated, and somebody who's alienated is necessarily individual. But that does kind of come back to Eliot's idea that we're all members of a tradition. Individuality is a bit of an illusion. In fact, it is, right? The separation is largely artificial, I think.
The tradition. That's an excellent answer. What's the responsibilities of those from whom our alien is alienated? The group, the supposed culture, the social mass.
Well, I mean, they're responsible to themselves. I suppose that's kind of a bit of the paradox is generally, for the most part, the crowd is a function of the crowd, you know. It's kind of getting into Kennedy here a little bit, but the crowd isn't responsible for the individual, but for the crowd, right? And that's a difficult thing, especially in our society when. And the paradox is that the crowd is made up of individuals. So it's kind of self-defeating thing. Yeah. I just laughed at my own joke. Sorry.
Dude, you know, one of the great commie poets, he's called the Red Poet. His name is Jack Hirschman. He was the poet laureate of San Francisco. Susie, can you shut that? And he just passed. So in his honor, he said he was a huge Finnegan's Wake freak too, and a great poet. and he said, Joyce was the only guy who cracked himself up. And I goes, no, Zappa cracked himself up too. I think the greatest thing is when the artists can touch themselves with their own art. Like if you crack a joke and it cracks you up, hey, you're that's good. You cracked one person up, you know.
Listen,
So
my dad cracked himself up all the time. All the time. It depends who you're with, right?
yeah.
Because my dad was, you know, to watch interviews and to watch Marshall interacting with other people in like these kind of circumstances is to watch one of your heroes, Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, in the ring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. That was Marshall. And he floated and he stung.
Ooh.
And my dad, Marshall was one of the wittiest people. And wit is a function of speed, right? Anybody can be witty the next day. In the ring is another. In the ring is another matter. Well, I'm not saying my dad was Marshall, but he was pretty quick, and he liked to have fun with people. I learned a lot watching him in interviews because, you know, it's fun to make people laugh, but it's a lot more satisfying to crack a joke that no one gets. Of course, that can get real old for both parties, but it can also be a lot of fun. And I just watch my dad sometimes talking to people, and he'd throw little things out. And because when you do a lot of interviews, they can get boring, right? So you have to make them a little bit fun by trying to throw things out there. And the interview will try and sneak things in if they're a good interviewer and try and trip you up. But the good interviewee will do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, try to avoid things or try to slip in other things. And the subplot happening, the tension in between the two to see who's awake and who's not. Well, so dad would throw puns out there, and you could tell he was just trying hard not to laugh himself. And that's always a lot of fun. But like I said, it can get old. It can get very tiresome for everybody involved. Nobody likes somebody who's too clever.
I'll just say that's two great answers to my question. The answer that tradition is extremely relevant. I'm glad you brought that in, but also individualism might be being able to risk taking jokes no one else gets regularly, right?
I asked Eric, if you were going to answer this question, then tell me how Marshall might answer it. Is tell us your life's philosophy with one word after the word the. Like the, Zappa's was the big note, say it's one word. Or, you know, I have a whole list of all the people who have said the, and Eric just went, the playground. That's mine. And he said, and Marshall's would be the playground, which is so huge because it's got the word ground in there, but it's got the most important word, play. But I'm curious, Clinton, please stay in here because I want you to answer this too. Is when Eliot said, we are all members of a tradition, how would each one of you suss out what that word tradition means? What do you think he means, or what do you want to expound on? What does that mean? Are we all members of the same family, the humanity? How would you suss it out? Let's start with you, Clinton.
I wonder if the word trade shares a root with the word tradition. It's my first intuition.
Yeah.
But it would be an inheritance. All the non-genetic inheritance, the environmental inheritance. So I think environment is a better word than nature when it comes to nature versus nurture. It's like the environmental inheritance, you know.
Environmental inheritance. That is good. Okay. What would you say, Andrew? How would you suss out that word in that context? We are all members of a tradition.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. It's hard to improve on what you said there, Clinton, except to maybe refine a little bit, because you took the right step, I think, in taking it out of time. Because the tradition doesn't have to necessarily mean history. It can include the present, and I think environment is the better word for it. Your peers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has been truly enlightening. I'll end with 2 quotes. So the hidden ground with all these people was Wyndham Lewis. He says, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. Dag nabbit, that's what we did. We're all right here in this Zoomadelic, Zoom gaze. You know, it's all Zoom gaze now. We're writing a detailed history of the future. I really appreciate both of you being here. And Marshall said it so beautiful. Communication of the new is a miracle, but it's not impossible. So thanks for proving, this thing about things that are possible and impossible. It was very possible. Sunra said, the impossible attracts me because every possible thing has been done and the world hasn't changed. So I'm inspired by you, Andrew. We can make the world a better place, especially when we sit around and talk to each other eye to eye in verbal exchange. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun.